I've never done a video about Robert Price before, which is a shame because he's an impressive debater. Here's a debate between him and William Lane Craig.
The majority of New Testament critics concur that Jesus was buried by Joseph of Arimathea in a tomb. According to the late John A.T. Robinson of Cambridge University, the burial of Jesus in the tomb is one of the earliest and best attested facts about Jesus. Fact number 2. On the Sunday after the crucifixion, Jesus' tomb was found empty by a group of his women followers.
Jesus was executed by crucifixion. The idea that he was allowed to be given a decent burial in a tomb afterward is very strange, because the whole point of a crucifixion is to desecrate the body of the victim. Why would the Romans sentence Jesus to crucifixion, a punishment explicitly designed to deny dignity to the condemned, then allow him to be given the dignity of a burial in a tomb? This makes no sense. The multiple hearsay attestations ought to be weighed against this absurdity.
The story is simple and lacks signs of legendary embellishment. In Mark's account, the women come to the tomb early Sunday morning and find the stone rolled away and the tomb empty. They see an angelic figure who proclaims to them that Jesus is risen.
Only in William Lane Craig's mind is a story involving an angelic figure one which lacks signs of legendary embellishment.
The tomb was probably discovered empty by women. In Jewish society, the testimony of women was regarded as so unreliable that they were not even permitted to serve as legal witnesses in a Jewish court of law. Now, in light of this fact, how remarkable it is that it is women who are the discoverers of Jesus' empty tomb. Any later legendary account would certainly have made male disciples like Peter and John to discover the empty tomb.
The Gospels contradict one another in their description about the women finding the tomb. In Mark, it says that the women who found the tomb told nobody about it. It says, "So they went out and fled from the tomb, for terror and amazement had seized them, and they said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid." If they said nothing to anyone, how the fuck did the author of the Gospel find out about it? In Matthew, however, it says, "So they left the tomb quickly with fear and great joy, and ran to tell the disciples." So did they tell the disciples, or did they say nothing to anyone? This is just one of many examples of inconsistencies between the Gospels about the finding of the tomb.
Number 1, the list of eyewitnesses to Jesus' resurrection appearances, which is quoted by Paul, guarantees that such appearances occurred.
Testimony alone, even multiply attested first-hand eyewitness testimony, can never guarantee anything. But in this case, Craig isn't even citing multiple independent first-hand eyewitness accounts. He's citing a list of witnesses given by Paul. If Paul had said, "I saw Jesus rise from the grave with my own eyes," that should be treated with severe skepticism. But what Craig is citing here is even less credible. Paul says, "Here's a list of people who said they saw Jesus after the crucifixion." Is the idea that this list was just made the fuck up really more incredible than the idea that a guy came back from the dead?
Given the early date of this information, as well as Paul's personal acquaintance with the people involved, such appearances can't be dismissed as legendary, but must refer to actual events.
The fact that Paul personally knew the people he's talking about, and the fact that his claims were made at an early date, means that the assertion that a guy came back from the dead can't be dismissed as legendary? On what fucking planet?
Number 2, the appearance narratives in the Gospels provide multiple independent attestation of the appearances. For example, the appearance to Peter is attested by Luke and Paul. The appearance to the 12 is attested by Luke, John, and Paul. The appearance to the women is attested by Matthew and John. The appearances in Galilee are attested by Mark, Matthew, and John. The appearance narratives span such a broad spectrum of independent sources that it cannot be reasonably denied.
If these were all first-hand accounts, I might be inclined to agree, but a bunch of accounts that are second-hand at best can quite reasonably be denied, or at least doubted, especially considering what they are claiming. Also, considering the degree to which Matthew and Luke are clearly based on Mark, I don't see how these are independent sources.
According to Old Testament law, Jesus' execution exposed him as a heretic, a man literally accursed by God.
No, it didn't. Crucifixion was not the punishment for heresy. Stoning was. Crucifixion was the punishment for treason or sedition, not heresy.
I think he tips his hand toward the end of the first chapter of his book, Reasonable Faith. He draws a distinction there between knowing Christianity is true and showing that it is true. He says, "What then should be our approach in apologetics? It should be something like this. My friend, I know Christianity is true because God's Spirit lives in me and assures me that it is true. And you can know it too because God is knocking at the door of your heart, telling you the same thing. If you are sincerely seeking God, then God will give you assurance that the gospel is true. Now, to show you it's true, I'll share with you some arguments and evidence that I really find convincing. But should my arguments seem weak and unconvincing to you, that's my fault, not God's. It only shows that I'm a poor apologist, not that the gospel is untrue."
The only way I can see finding hearsay rumor about a guy rising from the dead written years and sometimes decades after the fact is if one's judgment is severely biased in favor of such claims being true. Ultimately, what convinces Craig of the truth of Christianity are his feelies about the presence of the Holy Spirit in his heart, whatever the fuck that means. And thanks again to everybody who helps me out on Patreon. That's much appreciated.